Kunar Province, Afghanistan, 2005. The world reduced itself to a single breath. 6 men from SEAL Team 8 lay pinned down in the rocky ravine, dust and debris raining down with each impact of Taliban fire. Their extraction point, once just 400 meters away, might as well have been on another continent. 3 shooters on the ridge to the north. At least 4 more in the abandoned structures to the east. 7, maybe 8 tangos in total. "This is Bravo 6, Lieutenant Commander Wilson shouted into his radio. "We are taking heavy fire, requesting immediate air support." The static-filled response was the last thing any of them wanted to hear. "Negative, Bravo 6. Nearest air support is 18 minutes out." They wouldn't last 18 seconds, let alone 18 minutes. Wilson looked at his men, their faces streaked with sweat and dust, eyes reflecting the grim certainty of their situation. They would die here, in this God-forsaken ravine, thousands of miles from home. "I count 3 on the ridge," Petty Officer Reeves reported, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "If we time it right, maybe we can—" He never finished the sentence. 850 meters away, nestled in a natural depression on a facing ridge, a figure lay perfectly still. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope of a Macmillan TAC 338, Morgan Hayes tracked the first target. The Taliban fighter moved confidently along the ridgeline, believing himself invisible at this distance. Morgan controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, the technique they'd taught her at Camp Peary, the CIA's secret training facility known as the Farm. 3 heartbeats. 2. 1. Between beats, she squeezed the trigger. The first fighter dropped before the sound of the shot reached the valley. Morgan was already acquiring her second target. 6 seconds, 6 shots. 6 bodies fell. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team's reaction. Confusion, disbelief. Then immediate action as they seized the moment and moved toward extraction. They would never know who saved them that day. That was the way it had to be. Morgan Hayes had never existed on paper. Her unit wasn't officially acknowledged. The Ghost Protocol operated in the spaces between official military operations, in the shadows where America needed to act but couldn't be seen acting. As she disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, Morgan felt the familiar emptiness settle in her chest. She had saved 6 men today, but she couldn't save everyone. The memory of those she'd failed still haunted her. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Present day. Morgan Hayes stood in her sparsely furnished apartment, unpacking the last of her belongings. At 40, her athletic frame showed no signs of the punishment she'd put it through over 2 decades of service. Her brown hair, now freed from its customary tight bun, fell just past her shoulders. Only the faint lines around her eyes and the set of her mouth hinted at the weight she carried. The morning light caught the edge of the case on her bed. Almost unconsciously, her fingers traced the outline before opening it. Inside lay her Colt 1911, modified with custom grips and a match-grade barrel. A gift from Colonel Thomas Miller, her first mentor in special operations. A veteran of Desert Storm who'd seen something in the quiet, determined woman that others had missed. She removed the pistol, feeling its familiar weight, turned it over to read the inscription on the grip. Skill, not luck. Morgan set the pistol down and continued unpacking. Her small collection of books went on the shelf by the window, military history, tactical manuals, and a well-worn copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War that she read every morning. A ritual that centered her mind for the day ahead. Moving from base to base had taught her to travel light. The apartment would remain Spartan, functional, just like her. The brochure on the counter caught her eye. American Warriors, Combat Training for the Modern Warrior. The martial arts studio was only 3 blocks from her apartment. According to the website, the owner was Frank Sullivan, a former Navy SEAL with an impressive list of decorations and combat deployments. Morgan needed a place to train, to keep her edge. After 2 decades in the shadows, civilian life felt foreign, unsettling. Physical training was the one constant she could rely on. She slipped the brochure into her pocket and headed for the door. Time to see what this place was made of. The dream always started the same way. Morgan was back on that ridge in the Hindu Kush Mountains, her cheek pressed against the stock of her rifle. Through her scope, she could see the 4 men of SEAL Team 10 moving through the valley below. Lieutenant Michael Murphy, Petty Officers Danny Dietz, Matthew Axelson, and Marcus Luttrell, Operation Red Wings, June 28, 2005. In reality, Morgan had been 50 miles away when Team 10 was ambushed. By the time her unit received the distress call and she was deployed to the area, it was too late for all but one of them. But in the dream, she was there, watching it unfold, powerless to stop it. The Taliban fighters appeared on the ridgeline, not 3 or 4 as in the official reports, but dozens. They moved with practiced precision, encircling the SEAL team. In the dream, Morgan fired, again and again, dropping Taliban fighters with each shot. But for every one that fell, 3 more appeared. Her rifle grew hot in her hands. The scope fogged with her desperate breath. She watched Lieutenant Murphy expose himself to enemy fire to make the call for extraction. Watched him fall. Watched Dietz and Axelson fight to their last breath. And always, always, she woke at the same moment, when she lined up the shot that could have saved Luttrell from his 19 days of hell, only to have her rifle jam. The sound of the firing pin striking an empty chamber echoed in her mind as she sat bolt upright in bed, sweat-soaked and gasping. Morgan swung her legs over the side of the bed, pressing her palms against her eyes. The digital clock read 0347. 3 hours of sleep. It would have to be enough. She moved to the bookshelf, her fingers finding the familiar binding of The Art of War. The ancient text had become her touchstone over the years, its lessons on strategy and the psychology of conflict speaking to her in ways modern tactical manuals never could. She'd developed the habit of reading a passage each morning during her operational days, finding clarity in Sun Tzu's timeless wisdom. After reading a few pages, she replaced the book and headed for the shower. The hot water wouldn't wash away the memories, but it might prepare her for the day ahead. Her first visit to American Warriors was scheduled for 0900. New place, new people, new cover story. Just another day of pretending to be someone she wasn't. The American Warriors Combat Training Center occupied a converted warehouse 3 blocks from Morgan's apartment. The exterior was understated, but the interior spoke of money and meticulous attention to detail. Polished hardwood floors, state-of-the-art training equipment, glass cases displaying weapons and military memorabilia, and everywhere images of Frank Sullivan. Sullivan in desert camo, surrounded by his SEAL teammates. Sullivan receiving medals. Sullivan shaking hands with generals and politicians. The man himself stood in the center of the main training floor, instructing a group of 20 students. At 55, Sullivan maintained the physique of a man 10 years younger. His salt and pepper hair was cut in a military fade, his jaw square and determined. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Morgan entered quietly, taking a position at the back of the room. She observed Sullivan's technique with a professional eye. His form was good, if somewhat stylized for dramatic effect. He was teaching a knife disarming sequence, demonstrating on a muscular young man who played the role of attacker. In a real combat situation, Sullivan was saying, his voice carrying easily across the room, you won't have time to think. You'll react based on muscle memory. That's why we drill these movements until they become instinct. He executed a perfect disarm, twisting the practice knife from his partner's grip and flowing into a control position that left the younger man wincing. The battlefield doesn't care about your feelings, Sullivan continued. It doesn't care if you're tired or scared. It only cares if you survive. And the only way to survive is to be tougher, faster, and more decisive than your enemy. Morgan recognized the speech. It was the kind of tough guy wisdom that civilian instructors often adopted to lend authenticity to their teaching. Some of it was valid, some was theatrical nonsense. Her attention shifted to the students. Most were men in their 20s and 30s, with the built physiques of serious athletes or military personnel. A few women were scattered throughout the group, looking equally capable. One student in particular caught her eye, a tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped dark hair and the bearing of a soldier. The way he moved, the way he scanned the room. Ranger, Morgan thought. Maybe special forces. As if sensing her assessment, the man turned, catching Morgan's gaze. She didn't look away. Neither did he. Sullivan noticed the exchange and followed his student's line of sight to Morgan. Looks like we have a visitor, he said, gesturing for her to come forward. Don't be shy, ma'am. Everyone's welcome at American Warriors. Morgan stepped forward, aware of the eyes tracking her movement. She'd worn simple workout clothes, gray sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt. No logos, no flair, nothing to draw attention. I saw your website, she said, keeping her voice neutral. I'm interested in joining. Sullivan looked her up and down with an appraising eye. We train hard here. Real-world combat techniques, not the watered-down stuff they teach at the strip mall dojos. That's what I'm looking for, Morgan replied. Military background? Sullivan asked. Morgan nodded. Army, 15 years. What division? Admin support for 5th Special Forces, she said, using her prepared cover story. It was close enough to believable while being nearly impossible to verify. Special Forces Administration was compartmentalized and much of it classified. Sullivan's smile tightened slightly. Morgan recognized the look. He was recategorizing her from potential warrior to desk jockey. Well, we welcome all service members, he said, his tone now containing a hint of condescension. Brian here was with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 tours in Afghanistan. The broad-shouldered man Morgan had noticed earlier gave a curt nod. Mike over there, Sullivan continued, pointing to an older man with a weathered face. Served with the 10th Mountain Division in Afghanistan. And I, of course, spent 12 years with the Navy SEALs. DevGru, actually, though I'm not supposed to talk too much about that. Morgan kept her expression neutral, despite the internal red flag. Anyone who had actually served with DevGru, officially known as SEAL Team 6, knew better than to casually drop that information in a civilian setting. Impressive credentials, she said simply. You can watch today's class if you like, Sullivan offered. See if it's something you can handle. We have a women's self-defense program on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That might be more your speed. The condescension was unmistakable now. Morgan felt a familiar calm settling over her. The quiet place she went before an operation, before a kill. I'd prefer to join the regular class if that's all right, she said. Sullivan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, but fair warning, we don't go easy on anyone here. Morgan took a place at the back of the class. As Sullivan resumed his instruction, Brian approached her. Don't mind Frank, he said in a low voice. He's old school. Thinks women belong in support roles, not on the front lines. Is that what you think? Morgan asked. Brian shrugged. I fought alongside female soldiers in Afghanistan. Some could handle it, some couldn't. Just like the men. He extended his hand. Brian Thompson, by the way. Morgan Hayes, she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not challenging. Professional. Army admin, huh? Brian said, a hint of skepticism in his voice. You move more like someone with field experience. Morgan met his gaze evenly. You learn a lot working with special forces, even in support roles. Before Brian could respond, Sullivan called him back to the front to demonstrate the next technique. Morgan watched as Brian took his position, noticing the practiced way he set his stance, the balanced distribution of his weight. Definitely Rangers, possibly more. As the class progressed, Morgan observed Sullivan's teaching style. He was technically proficient, but his methods emphasized aggression over control, flash over substance. It was training designed to impress rather than to truly prepare someone for combat. The studio itself told a similar story. The walls were adorned with racks of training weapons, some practical, others exotic and impractical. An M4A1 carbine mounted in a glass case. K-bar knives arranged in a display. Photos of Sullivan with various celebrities and political figures. Most telling were the SEAL Trident insignias in patches prominently displayed throughout the studio. Any real SEAL Morgan had known kept such things private, sacred. They didn't use them as decoration or marketing tools. The class ended with a sparring session. Sullivan paired the students, deliberately matching Morgan with a woman half her age. The message was clear. The women should train with women. Morgan accepted the pairing without comment. Her partner, a fit young woman named Lisa, proved to be a capable fighter with solid fundamentals. Morgan kept her own skills carefully contained, fighting just well enough to hold her own without revealing her true capabilities. After class, Sullivan approached Morgan with an application form. So, what did you think? Think you can keep up with our warriors? I'll manage, Morgan said, taking the form. Monthly membership is $150, Sullivan said, but for military, we offer a discount, $120. Morgan nodded, filling out the form with her cover details. As she wrote, she noticed Sullivan examining her with renewed interest. You know, he said, you carry yourself well for someone who spent their career behind a desk. good posture, controlled movements. Physical training was mandatory even for admin, Morgan replied, handing back the completed form. Sullivan took it, his eyes lingering on her hands. The calluses, the subtle scars, hands that had done more than type reports. Well, welcome to American Warriors, Morgan Hayes, he said. We'll see what you're made of. As Morgan turned to leave, she caught sight of a new arrival standing in the doorway. A tall, lean man in his 60s with the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. His silver hair was cut in a regulation style that hadn't changed in 40 years. He wore civilian clothes, but nothing could disguise what he was. Their eyes met across the room. Recognition flashed in the man's eyes, quickly concealed. Morgan felt her pulse quicken. Of all the people to encounter here, Colonel James Harrison was the last person she expected. The man who had recruited her into the Ghost Protocol. The man who knew exactly what she was capable of. The man who had sent her on the mission that still haunted her dreams. Sullivan noticed the newcomer and his entire demeanor changed. The swagger was replaced by genuine respect. "Colonel Harrison?" he called out. "What an honor, sir. Welcome to American Warriors." Harrison nodded cordially, but his eyes remained on Morgan for a fraction of a second too long before turning to Sullivan. "Just thought I'd stop by and see your operation, Sullivan," Harrison said. "Heard good things about your training program." Morgan slipped out while Sullivan was distracted with Harrison. As she left, she felt Harrison's eyes on her back. He would find her later. He always did. The question was, why was he here? Colonel Harrison never did anything without a purpose. If he had tracked her to Fort Bragg, to this specific dojo, something was happening. Something that required the skills of a ghost. Colonel James Harrison watched Morgan Hayes leave the dojo, careful to maintain a neutral expression. After 25 years in military intelligence and special operations, masking his thoughts was second nature. But seeing Morgan here of all places had caught him off guard. Not that Morgan's presence in Fort Bragg was unexpected. After her honorable discharge, Harrison had kept tabs on her movements. It was the least he could do for one of the finest operatives he'd ever commanded. But finding her at Sullivan's dojo raised questions. Frank Sullivan, self-proclaimed DevGru operator, man of supposedly legendary exploits that conveniently could never be verified due to their classified nature. Harrison knew better. "Colonel, it's truly an honor," Sullivan was saying, pumping Harrison's hand enthusiastically. "I've followed your career since Desert Storm. Your leadership of Task Force 121 during the capture of Saddam Hussein was textbook special operations." Harrison allowed a thin smile. "You seem well informed about classified operations, Mr. Sullivan." Sullivan waved a hand dismissively. "In our circles, word gets around. DevGru, Task Force 121, we've all worked the same shadows." Harrison noted the presumptuous "we," as if Sullivan belonged in the same category as the men and women who had actually served in JSOC's most elite units. "Indeed," Harrison said noncommittally, "your facility is impressive." "Only the best for America's warriors," Sullivan replied, gesturing proudly around the dojo. "We train civilians, military, law enforcement, even have a few Delta operators who drop in when they are between deployments." Another claim that raised Harrison's internal alarms. Delta Force operators, officially known as Combat Applications Group, didn't casually drop in to civilian dojos between deployments. "I see you have invested heavily in equipment and decor," Harrison observed, noting the weapons displays and military memorabilia. "Authenticity matters," Sullivan said. "My students deserve the real deal. Speaking of which, would you care to address the class? Having a legend like yourself share some wisdom would be invaluable." Harrison glanced at the students, who were watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity. "Perhaps another time," he said. "Today, I'm just observing." Sullivan looked momentarily disappointed, but recovered quickly. "Of course, sir. Feel free to use my office if you need privacy. Top of the stairs, end of the hall." Harrison nodded his thanks and moved to the edge of the training floor. As Sullivan resumed instructing his class, Harrison observed the dynamics of the room. His attention kept returning to one particular student, a man in his mid-40s with the hard-worn look of a combat veteran. Unlike the others, who hung on Sullivan's every word, this man watched with a slightly critical eye. Interesting. Harrison made his way casually around the perimeter of the room until he was standing near the man. "Impressive facility," Harrison said quietly. The man glanced at him. All show, if you ask me. You don't approve of Sullivan's methods? I've seen real combat, the man replied. This Hollywood stuff might look good in the movies, but it'll get you killed in the real world. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. You've served? Mike Foster, 10th Mountain Division. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Those were tough deployments. Foster's eyes took on a distant look. Kunar Province, 2005. That was the worst. My squad was pinned down by Taliban fighters. We were as good as dead. Harrison felt a chill of recognition. But you made it out. Someone saved us, Foster said, his voice dropping. 6 shots from nowhere, 6 Taliban down. We never found out who our guardian angel was. Some sniper from another unit, operating off the books. Brass denied any knowledge, of course. Harrison kept his expression carefully neutral. The fog of war creates many mysteries. Foster studied him with sudden intensity. You know something about it, don't you? I know that good soldiers sometimes find themselves in the right place at the right time, Harrison replied evenly, and that not all operations make it into the official record. Before Foster could press further, Sullivan called for the class to gather around for a demonstration. Harrison used the opportunity to slip away, heading up the stairs to Sullivan's office. Once inside, he closed the door and immediately accessed the secure tablet in his briefcase. His fingerprint unlocked a database that officially didn't exist, containing personnel files that had been purged from all government systems. He typed Sullivan Frank into the search field. The file that appeared confirmed what Harrison already suspected. Frank Sullivan had indeed served in the Navy, but not with DevGru. He'd been assigned to SEAL Team 2 as support personnel. No combat deployments, administratively discharged in 1998 after failing to meet physical standards. Harrison closed the file and opened another search window. This time he typed Hayes Morgan. The file that appeared was heavily redacted, even at Harrison's clearance level 1, but certain details remained. Master Sergeant Morgan Hayes, recruited 2002 into classified JSOC program, codenamed Spectre. Operational history, redacted. Confirmed kills, 87. Decorations, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts, numerous classified commendations. Status, honorably discharged 2022 following Operation Blackwater. Harrison closed the file, troubled. Morgan Hayes was one of 5 women who had completed the most grueling special operations training program ever devised. The Ghost Protocol had been created after 9/11, when military strategists realized that female operators could access places and situations that were impossible for their male counterparts, particularly in conservative Middle Eastern societies. Of the 20 women selected for the program, only 5 had completed the 18-month training that combined elements of SEAL Bud on-S, Delta selection, and specialized sniper training. Morgan Hayes had emerged as the most lethal of them all, and now she was here, in Sullivan's dojo, posing as an administrative clerk. Harrison's secure phone vibrated. The text message was brief. Roof, 10 minutes, no signature needed. Harrison deleted the message and returned the tablet to his briefcase. As he left Sullivan's office, he could hear the instructor's voice booming from the training floor below. In a real combat situation, hesitation means death. You strike first, strike hard, and don't stop until the threat is neutralized. Harrison shook his head slightly, the bluster of a man who had never faced real combat. He made his way to the back stairwell that led to the roof, moving with the quiet efficiency that had kept him alive through 3 decades of special operations. Morgan was already there, standing at the edge of the roof, looking out over the Fort Bragg skyline. She didn't turn as Harrison approached, but he knew she was aware of his presence. Of all the dojos in all the towns in all the world, Harrison said, you walk into Sullivan's. Morgan turned, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I could say the same to you, Colonel. James, please. I've been retired for 2 years. No one with your clearance level ever truly retires, Morgan replied. Why are you here? Harrison moved to stand beside her, looking out over the military base that sprawled before them. Sullivan has been on our radar for a while. Former Navy support personnel claiming DevGru credentials, teaching potentially dangerous techniques to civilians. Nothing criminal, just concerning. That doesn't explain why you're personally investigating a stolen valor case, Morgan said. There's more. Harrison nodded. Always direct. That's what I appreciated about you. He paused. Sullivan has been connected to some concerning individuals. Domestic extremists, former military with radical ideologies. And you think I can help? I didn't know you were here, Harrison admitted. But now that I do, yes, I think you can help. You have a particular set of skills, Morgan. Skills that might be needed again. Morgan's expression hardened. I left that life behind. After Blackwater, I know, Harrison interrupted gently. What happened wasn't your fault. Tell that to Dr. Atkinson's family, Morgan replied, her voice flat. 8 hostiles eliminated, but I couldn't save one American doctor. Some ghost I turned out to be. Harrison was silent for a moment, respecting her grief. We've received intelligence that Omar al-Farouk is stateside. Morgan went very still. That's impossible. He died in the airstrike after Blackwater. No body was ever recovered, Harrison reminded her. And now facial recognition has picked him up at 3 different locations along the eastern seaboard in the past month. The most recent sighting was 20 miles from here. What's he doing in the U.S.? We think he's looking for you, Harrison said gravely. He's been asking questions about the ghost in circles where that name has meaning. Morgan's hand unconsciously moved to her side, where a scar marked the place al-Farouk's bullet had found her during the Blackwater operation. And you think Sullivan is connected? Harrison shrugged. It's a possibility we're investigating. The timing of your appearance here is coincidental. I don't believe in coincidence, Morgan said. Neither do I, Harrison agreed, which is why I'm asking you to keep your eyes open. Don't engage, just observe. If Sullivan is helping al-Farouk, we need to know. Morgan considered this for a long moment. I'm not back in, James. I'll keep my eyes open, but that's it. If al-Farouk shows up, I'll call it in and walk away. Harrison nodded, though they both knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. That's all I'm asking. As they stood in silence, the sounds of Fort Bragg surrounded them. The distant thump of helicopters, the occasional burst of automatic weapons fire from the ranges, the rhythmic cadence of troops running in formation. One more thing, Harrison said finally. Your cover as administrative support won't hold up to serious scrutiny, not with the way you move. Morgan raised an eyebrow. What gave me away? The way you entered the room, the way you positioned yourself, the ghost walk, that subtle foot placement technique we developed for Delta operators to move silently. Sullivan might be a fraud, but some of his students are the real deal. They'll notice. Like Mike Foster? Morgan asked. Harrison's surprise showed for a fraction of a second. You know him? I recognized him from Kunar, Morgan said quietly. He was the squad leader of the team I saved that day. Does he know it was you? Morgan shook her head. No one knew. That was the point of Ghost Protocol. We didn't exist. Until now, Harrison said. Be careful, Morgan. If al-Farouk is truly looking for you, anyone close to you could be in danger. Morgan's expression hardened. I live alone. I have no friends, no family. That was the deal when I signed up for Ghost Protocol. Complete deniability, complete isolation. The sadness in Harrison's eyes was genuine. It was a heavy price to ask. It was a price I was willing to pay, Morgan replied, for my country. Harrison nodded, knowing there was nothing more to say. The women of Ghost Protocol had sacrificed normal lives for a chance to serve in ways no one would ever know or acknowledge. They were the shadows behind America's most classified operations, the ghosts who made impossible missions possible. I should get back, Harrison said. Sullivan will wonder where I've gone. I'll be in touch if I notice anything suspicious, Morgan promised. As Harrison turned to leave, Morgan spoke again. James, thank you for checking on me. After Blackwater. Harrison paused. You were one of the best operatives I ever commanded, Morgan. Ghost Protocol wouldn't have succeeded without you. And yet here we are, Morgan said with a hint of bitterness. Me, pretending to be a clerk. Sullivan, pretending to be a SEAL. The difference is I know what I really am. Harrison had no answer for that. He left Morgan on the rooftop, staring out at the military base that had been her whole world for so long. A world she had left behind, but which refused to let her go completely. As he descended the stairs, Harrison's mind turned to the implications of Omar al-Farouk being on American soil. If the terrorist truly was hunting the ghost, the situation could escalate quickly. Morgan Hayes might have left the shadow world behind, but the shadows had a way of following you, especially when those shadows had names and faces, and a burning desire for revenge. The following week, Morgan maintained her cover, attending classes at American Warriors, while carefully observing Sullivan and his operation. She kept her skills deliberately contained, performing just well enough to be considered competent but not exceptional. It was a balancing act she had perfected over years of undercover work. Each morning began the same way, a passage from the art of war, followed by a brief meditation. The ritual centered her, preparing her mind for the dual roles she now played, civilian martial arts student and covert observer. Sullivan largely ignored her, focusing his attention on the male students, particularly those with military backgrounds. Brian Thompson had become something of a protege, demonstrating techniques alongside Sullivan and receiving special instruction after class. Morgan used this time to build a mental profile of the dojo and its participants. Mike Foster, the 10th Mountain Division veteran, continued to attend but remained somewhat aloof from Sullivan's inner circle. He and Morgan exchanged occasional nods of recognition, but had not spoken further. On Thursday evening, Sullivan announced a special training session. "Combat isn't predictable," he told the assembled class. "You need to be ready for anything. Today we're going to practice wrist grabs and escapes. These techniques could save your life if someone tries to control you in a confrontation." Sullivan demonstrated a series of movements with Brian, showing how to break free from various grip positions. The techniques were functional, if somewhat theatrical. Morgan noted several inefficiencies that would make them less effective against a determined attacker. "Now pair up and practice," Sullivan instructed. "I'll come around and check your form." Morgan paired with Lisa, the young woman she had sparred with previously. As they practiced, Morgan provided quiet suggestions to improve Lisa's technique, drawing on her actual combat experience rather than Sullivan's showy methods. "That's much better," Morgan said, as Lisa executed a clean escape. "Remember, it's about leverage, not strength. Use your attacker's momentum against them." "You seem to know a lot about this," Lisa observed. Morgan shrugged. "Basic principles. Physics doesn't care how strong you are." Sullivan appeared beside them, watching with a critical eye. "Not bad, Lisa," he said, then turned to Morgan. "Your technique is unorthodox, Hayes, not what I demonstrated." "It works," Morgan replied simply. Sullivan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think you know better than a DevGru operator?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Around them, other students had stopped practicing to watch the exchange. "I think different approaches work for different people," Morgan said diplomatically. "Lisa has a smaller frame. She needs to maximize leverage." "Combat isn't about theory," Sullivan said, his voice carrying across the now silent dojo. "It's about what works in the real world, when your life is on the line." Morgan said nothing, maintaining an expression of polite interest. Sullivan seemed irritated by her lack of reaction. "You know what? Since you're so quiet back there, why don't you come up here and show us how you'd handle a real threat? Or are you just here to watch?" A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the class. Brian Thompson looked uncomfortable. Mike Foster watched intently, his expression unreadable. From his position near the door, Colonel Harrison observed the scene with growing concern. He hadn't expected Sullivan to single Morgan out so directly. This could complicate matters significantly. Morgan considered her options. She could decline the challenge, maintaining her cover but potentially losing access to Sullivan and his operation. Or she could accept and carefully control her response, revealing just enough skill to satisfy the challenge without exposing her true capabilities. "I'm happy to demonstrate," she said, moving toward the center of the training floor. Sullivan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Excellent. We'll keep it simple. I'll grab your wrist. You show us your escape technique." The students formed a circle around them. Morgan stood calmly, her posture relaxed but perfectly balanced. To most observers, she appeared unremarkable. But Harrison recognized the subtle shift in her stance, the almost imperceptible adjustment of her weight distribution. She had entered what the Ghost Protocol operatives called Combat Readiness State Zero, a condition of complete preparedness masked by apparent casual relaxation. "See, nothing to it," Sullivan said, turning to his class with a smug grin. "The first step is overcoming your fear. Now I'm going to grab her wrist. I want you all to watch how she panics, how her assumptions about her own strength fail her. This is the moment of truth for a beginner. He reached out, his hand moving with practiced confidence, and clamped down on Morgan's right wrist. He expected resistance, a flinch, perhaps even fear. He received none of it. For a fraction of a second, Morgan's hand remained completely limp in his grasp. The unexpected dead weight was disorienting. Then, almost too fast to follow, everything changed. Morgan's fingers curled around the base of Sullivan's thumb, applying precise pressure to a nerve cluster. Simultaneously, her body flowed into his space, her left hand sliding under his extended arm to cup his elbow. Her hips turned, using his forward momentum against him. Sullivan felt a moment of weightlessness as his balance shattered. Before he could process what was happening, he was on his back, the air driven from his lungs by the impact. Morgan knelt on his chest, her forearm pressed firmly against his throat. It wasn't a choke. It was a simple, undeniable statement of control. The entire sequence, from his grab to his submission, had taken less than 2 seconds. The dojo was plunged into stunned silence. Sullivan lay pinned, not by Morgan's weight, but by a perfect application of leverage and technique. He couldn't move, not because she was strong, but because she understood the mechanics of the human body better than he did. "That's not possible," one of the senior students whispered. Morgan's eyes met Sullivan's. They were calm, clear, and utterly devoid of malice or triumph. It was the detached focus of a professional who had just completed a task. She released the pressure on his throat and rose to her feet in a single smooth motion, extending a hand to help him up. Sullivan ignored it, pushing himself up slowly, his face flushed with humiliation and disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded, his voice rough. "That's not standard military training." Before Morgan could answer, Colonel Harrison stepped forward from the edge of the room. The authority in his bearing silenced everyone, including Sullivan. "Ma'am," Harrison said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "Permission to see your identification." It was a request, not an order, phrased with a deference that confused everyone in the room. Morgan looked from Sullivan to Harrison, then gave a short nod. She walked to her gym bag by the wall and retrieved a simple, unadorned wallet. From it, she produced a card and handed it to Harrison. Harrison took it without looking at her, his eyes scanning the text. The students watched, bewildered. Sullivan pushed himself to his feet, clutching his wrist, his face a mask of anger and confusion. Harrison's expression shifted from respect to outright awe as he read the card. He looked up, not at Morgan, but at the assembled class. "For those of you who are wondering what just happened," Harrison began, his voice resonating with authority, "you have just witnessed the difference between a spurt and a science, the difference between loud assumptions and quiet competence." He held up the identification card. "This is a Department of Defense active credentials card. The name on it is Morgan Hayes." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "But I doubt many people know her by that name." He looked back down at the card, then fixed his gaze on Sullivan. "What you know is what you see. A woman of average build. What you don't know is what's written here." He began to read in a clear, measured cadence that stripped away all ambiguity. "Unit designation, Joint Special Operations Command, Operational Detachment Spectre. Primary specialty, Special Activities Division. Cross-trained with Naval Special Warfare Development Group and 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Combat deployments, 17, classified." He lowered the card and looked around the room, his eyes hard as steel. "You see a quiet student. I see an operator who has spent more time in hostile territory than all of you combined have spent in this dojo. You made a judgment based on her gender. The enemies of our nation made the same judgment. They are not here to tell you how that worked out for them." He turned his full attention back to Sullivan. "You asked her to show you how to handle a threat. She did. The fact that you were still breathing when she was done was a professional courtesy. The validation was absolute, a public correction delivered with the force of a hammer blow, shattering every ignorant assumption that had filled the room only moments before." Sullivan stood speechless, his carefully constructed persona crumbling under the weight of Harrison's words. Morgan remained expressionless, but inside a storm was brewing. Her cover was blown. Harrison had exposed her, not just to Sullivan, but to everyone in the room. Whatever game the colonel was playing, he had just changed the rules dramatically. And somewhere out there, Omar Al-Farouk was hunting for the ghost. A ghost who no longer had the protection of anonymity. The shadows were closing in, and Morgan Hayes stood exposed in the harsh light of revealed truth. The very thing that had kept her alive for 20 years, her invisibility, was gone. The dojo fell silent as Morgan stepped into the center of the training mat. Every eye tracked her movement, analyzing, judging. Sullivan stood with arms crossed, his expression a mixture of condescension and anticipation. He expected to humiliate her, to put the desk jockey in her place. Morgan felt time slow around her. This moment was dangerous, not physically, but strategically. Her mission parameters had been clear. Observe Sullivan, determine his connection to Al-Farouk, maintain cover. Revealing her skills directly contradicted those objectives. Yet Harrison's presence changed the equation. The colonel wouldn't have exposed her without reason. There was a larger game at play, one she didn't fully understand. "Ready when you are," Sullivan announced, his voice carrying across the silent room. He extended his arm, hand open. "I'll grab your wrist. Show us what you've got." Morgan nodded once, her face betraying nothing. She stood naturally without the exaggerated stance Sullivan had demonstrated earlier. To the untrained eye, she appeared vulnerable, unprepared. Mike Foster saw differently. The veteran leaned forward slightly, recognizing something in her posture that others missed. A coiled readiness that reminded him of the Tier 1 operators he'd encountered downrange. Sullivan moved with practiced confidence, his hand darting forward to seize Morgan's right wrist. His grip was firm, professional, designed to control rather than hurt. His free hand was already positioning for the follow-up move he would use to demonstrate her helplessness. For a fraction of a second, Morgan allowed her wrist to go completely limp in his grasp. The sudden dead weight was disorienting, a subtle psychological disruption she'd learned during close-quarters combat training with Mossad instructors. In that moment of confusion, she moved. Her fingers curled with surgical precision, finding the pressure point at the base of Sullivan's thumb, the intersection of three nerve clusters that Delta Force operatives called the phantom button. Simultaneously, her body pivoted into his space, her left hand sliding under his extended arm to cup his elbow. The movement was fluid, economic, devoid of wasted motion. It wasn't the flashy takedown Sullivan expected. It was something altogether more efficient. She applied targeted pressure while turning her hips, using his own forward momentum against him. Physics took over. Sullivan's balance collapsed completely. Before his brain could process what was happening, he was airborne. Then flat on his back, the impact driving air from his lungs. Morgan followed him down, her knee positioned on his sternum, her forearm across his throat. Not choking, controlling. A combat position designed to immobilize without injury. 2 seconds, from his grab to his complete immobilization. 2 seconds that revealed a lifetime of training. Sullivan's eyes widened in shock and confusion. He tried to move to escape, but found himself locked in place by precise applications of pressure and leverage. It wasn't Morgan's strength that held him. It was her intimate understanding of human biomechanics. The silence in the dojo deepened. Students stared, struggling to process what they'd just witnessed. Brian Thompson's expression shifted from surprise to respect. Lisa covered her mouth with one hand, eyes wide. "That's not possible," one of Sullivan's senior students whispered. Morgan's eyes met Sullivan's. There was no triumph in her gaze, no satisfaction, only the detached focus of a professional completing a task. She released the pressure and rose to her feet in a single smooth motion, offering Sullivan her hand. He ignored it, pushing himself up slowly, his face flushed with humiliation. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded, voice rough. "That's no standard military technique." Before Morgan could respond, Colonel Harrison stepped forward from the edge of the room. His presence commanded immediate attention, silencing even Sullivan. "Ma'am," Harrison said, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. "Permission to see your identification." It was a request phrased as military protocol, something that confused the civilian students but carried profound meaning for anyone who had served. Morgan looked from Sullivan to Harrison, then gave a short nod. She retrieved her wallet from her gym bag and produced a Department of Defense credentials card, handing it to Harrison. The colonel took it, eyes scanning the text. His expression shifted from professional detachment to undisguised reverence. For those of you wondering what just happened, Harrison addressed the class, you have just witnessed the difference between a sport and a science. The difference between loud assumptions and quiet competence. He held up the identification card. This is a Department of Defense active credentials card. The name on it is Morgan Hayes. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. But I doubt many people know her by that name. Sullivan stared, confusion giving way to dawning realization. What you know is what you see, Harrison continued, a woman of average build. What you don't know is what's written here. He began to read in a clear, measured cadence. Unit designation, Joint Special Operations Command, Operational Detachment Spectre. Primary specialty, Special Activities Division. Cross-trained with Naval Special Warfare Development Group and 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Combat deployments, 17. Classified. A murmur swept through the room. Sullivan's face drained of color. You see a quiet student, Harrison said, his voice hardening. I see an operator who has spent more time in hostile territory than all of you combined have spent in this dojo. You made a judgment based on her gender. The enemies of our nation made the same judgment. They are not here to tell you how that worked out for them. He turned his full attention to Sullivan. You asked her to show you how to handle a threat. She did. The fact that you were still breathing when she was done was a professional courtesy. The validation was absolute. Harrison's words shattered every assumption in the room, replacing them with a new, uncomfortable truth. Morgan Hayes was not who they thought she was. She was something far more formidable. Sullivan stood speechless, his carefully constructed persona crumbling. The DevGru operator had just been completely dominated by a woman he'd dismissed as a desk jockey. Worse, he'd been exposed as a fraud in front of his students. Morgan maintained her neutral expression, but inwardly, she processed the implications of Harrison's revelation. Her cover was blown. Whatever game the colonel was playing had just changed dramatically. The fallout was immediate. Sullivan recovered enough to dismiss the class early, his voice lacking its usual authority. Students filed out in stunned silence, casting backward glances at Morgan. Some looked afraid, others intrigued. Brian Thompson lingered, clearly wanting to approach her, but ultimately decided against it and left with the others. Only 4 people remained: Morgan, Harrison, Sullivan, and Mike Foster, who stood apart, watching the scene unfold with intense interest. I think you owe me an explanation, Sullivan said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Who are you really? And what are you doing in my dojo? Morgan looked to Harrison, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I told you my name, she said. Morgan Hayes, former Army. The rest is classified. Classified? Bullshit! Sullivan's composure cracked. You come into my house, humiliate me in front of my students, and expect me to accept classified as an explanation? Mr. Sullivan, yes, I am, Harrison interjected calmly. I understand your frustration, but Sergeant Hayes' service record is indeed classified at the highest levels, as is the unit she served with. What unit? Sullivan demanded. I've never heard of any operational detachment specter. That's rather the point, Harrison replied. It doesn't officially exist. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. So I'm supposed to believe she's some kind of super soldier from a secret unit that doesn't exist? Convenient. Believe what you want, Morgan said flatly. The demonstration speaks for itself. Sullivan turned to Harrison. And you, Colonel? What's your role in this charade? I commanded the program that trained Sergeant Hayes and others like her, Harrison said. A program created after 9/11 to address specific operational needs in the war on terror. Others like her? Sullivan's voice dripped with skepticism. Harrison nodded. In 2002, the Pentagon identified a critical gap in our special operations capabilities. In certain theaters, particularly in conservative Islamic regions, male operators faced severe limitations. They couldn't access certain areas, speak to certain people, move without detection in certain environments. So you recruited women, Foster said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to him. Yes, Harrison confirmed. 20 candidates from all branches of the military. Women with exceptional physical capabilities, intelligence, and psychological resilience. 20 women, Morgan added quietly. 5 completed training. Sullivan scoffed. What training? 18 months, Harrison replied, beginning with the Navy SEALs basic underwater demolition SEAL training. Buds? Sullivan interrupted, incredulous. Women in buds? Modified for operational specificity, but yes, essentially buds, Harrison continued, followed by advanced training with Delta Force, CIA's Special Activities Division, and specialized modules developed for the program's unique requirements. That's impossible, Sullivan insisted. No woman could complete that kind of training. Morgan's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. 5 of us did. From his position near the wall, Foster spoke again. What kind of operations? Harrison exchanged a glance with Morgan. The kind that don't make it into briefings, long-range reconnaissance, high-value target acquisition, protective operations in non-permissive environments. Assassinations, Sullivan said flatly. Targeted eliminations of specific threats to national security, Harrison corrected. Sullivan turned to Morgan, studying her with new eyes. So you're what? Some kind of government assassin? I was a soldier, Morgan replied evenly. I followed lawful orders and completed assigned missions. How many? Sullivan asked. Morgan held his gaze without answering. Her operational record speaks for itself, Harrison said. Sergeant Hayes is one of the most effective special operators this country has ever produced. 87 confirmed enemy combatants neutralized. 2 silver stars, 2 purple hearts. Foster whistled softly. 87. That would put you among the top snipers in military history. Morgan remained silent. Sullivan's expression shifted from anger to calculation. So why are you here, in my dojo? A valid question. Morgan looked to Harrison, who nodded slightly. I'm retired, she said simply, looking for a place to train. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Sullivan clearly didn't believe her. And of all the dojos in all the towns in America, you just happened to walk into mine? The same day Colonel Harrison shows up for a casual visit? I don't believe in coincidences either, Mr. Sullivan, Harrison said, but sometimes timing aligns in unexpected ways. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. What aren't you telling me? Before Harrison could respond, Foster stepped forward. Kunar Province, he said, looking directly at Morgan. 2005. 6 Taliban fighters, 6 shots. Was that you? The question hung in the air. Morgan felt a tightness in her chest. That operation had never been officially acknowledged. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Foster wasn't deterred. I was there. Squad leader for a ranger team pinned down in a ravine. We were minutes from being overrun when 6 Taliban fighters dropped, one after another. Perfect shots, over 800 meters in mountain conditions with variable winds. He took another step toward her. We called in the coordinates of the shooter's position, but when a team went to investigate, they found nothing, just some brass casings. The brass said it must have been another unit operating in the area, but no one ever took credit. Morgan maintained her neutral expression, but Harrison could see the tension in her posture. It was you, wasn't it? Foster pressed. You were our guardian angel. After a long moment, Morgan gave a slight nod. We received intel about a Taliban force moving to engage a ranger squad. I was in position for overwatch. Foster's expression transformed. You saved my entire team, 6 men. We all have families now, children. None of that would exist without you. The raw emotion in his voice was discomfiting. Morgan had never received direct gratitude for her operations. Ghost Protocol operatives worked without recognition. Their successes remained classified, their sacrifices unacknowledged. I was doing my job, she said simply. Your job? Foster shook his head in amazement. Lady, you dropped 6 hostiles in 8 seconds from 850 meters with a 15-knot crosswind. That's not a job. That's a miracle. Sullivan watched this exchange with growing disbelief. So you're telling me she's some kind of super sniper from a secret all-female kill squad? I wouldn't use that terminology, Harrison said dryly, but essentially, yes. Sullivan turned to Morgan. And what does a super sniper want with my humble dojo? Morgan's patience was wearing thin. As I said, a place to train. Bullshit, Sullivan shot back. You're here for something else, both of you. Harrison stepped forward. Mr. Sullivan, I think we've taken enough of your time today. Perhaps it would be best if we continued this conversation another time. No, Sullivan said firmly. You don't get to drop this bomb in my dojo and then walk away. I want the truth. What are you really doing here? The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Morgan subtly shifted her weight, preparing for any eventuality. Harrison maintained his calm demeanor, but his eyes had hardened. Mr. Sullivan, Harrison began. Frank, Foster interrupted, his voice carrying a warning. I'd step very carefully here. These aren't people you want to antagonize. Sullivan's face flushed with renewed anger. This is my dojo. I have a right to know. You have no rights here, Morgan cut in, her voice quiet but razor sharp. Your entire career is built on lies. You were never DevGru. You were support personnel for SEAL Team 2. You never saw combat. You were administratively discharged after failing to meet physical standards. Sullivan went very still. How do you know that? It's my job to know, Harrison replied. Your service record is a matter of public record. The embellishments you've added are noted. Sullivan's face drained of color. You can't prove any of that. We don't need to, Harrison said. We're not here about your stolen valor, Mr. Sullivan. That's between you and your conscience. Then why are you here? Sullivan demanded, desperation creeping into his voice. Harrison glanced at Morgan, then back to Sullivan. We have reason to believe you may have unwittingly associated with individuals of interest to national security. What individuals? Have you recently accepted any new students? Morgan asked. Middle Eastern men, possibly with military training? Sullivan stared at her. What is this? Some kind of racial profiling? Answer the question, Harrison said, his voice hardening. Sullivan hesitated. I get new students all the time. Some might be Middle Eastern. I don't discriminate. Any who showed particular interest in your SEAL background? Morgan pressed. Who asked about your deployments, your missions? A flicker of recognition crossed Sullivan's face. There was one guy, started about 3 weeks ago, said he was Jordanian, former Special Forces, wanted to exchange techniques. Morgan and Harrison exchanged glances. Name, Harrison asked. Rami something. Al-Jabri, I think. Morgan's expression didn't change, but Harrison noted the slight tension in her shoulders. Rami Al-Jabri was one of Omar al-Farouk's known aliases. Is he still training here? Morgan asked. Sullivan nodded. He comes to the advanced class on Mondays and Wednesdays, paid for 6 months up front, cash. Did he ask about other instructors, other students? Sullivan frowned, thinking. Actually, yeah. He seemed interested in any female instructors we might have. Said he wanted to learn techniques that would work regardless of size or strength. The pieces clicked into place. Al-Farouk was hunting for Morgan, using Sullivan's dojo as a hub for intelligence gathering. I think we've heard enough, Harrison said. Mr. Sullivan, I strongly advise you to contact us if this student returns. Do not engage with him further. Do not mention this conversation. Sullivan looked between them, realization dawning. He's dangerous, isn't he? Who is he really? Someone who should not be in the United States, Morgan replied. Someone with a grudge. Against who? You? Sullivan asked. Morgan didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Jesus Christ, Sullivan muttered. What have I gotten myself into? Nothing if you cooperate, Harrison assured him. We'll handle the situation. Sullivan's expression hardened suddenly. No, no way. I want you both out of my dojo. Now, I didn't sign up for this spy versus spy bullshit. Mr. Sullivan, Harrison began. Out, Sullivan shouted. I don't care who you are or what medals you have. This is my business, my livelihood. I won't have it compromised by whatever game you're playing. Morgan studied him carefully. The fear beneath his anger was genuine. But there was something else, a calculation that didn't fit the moment. Fine, she said before Harrison could respond. We're leaving, but when Al-Jabri returns, you'll wish we hadn't. Is that a threat? Sullivan demanded. No, Morgan replied. It's a prediction. She turned and walked toward the door, Harrison following after a moment's hesitation. Foster fell in step beside them. I'm coming with you, he said quietly. As they reached the door, Sullivan called out, Hayes! Morgan paused, looking back. Don't come back, Sullivan said. You're not welcome here anymore. Morgan held his gaze for a long moment, then left without another word. Outside, the evening air was cool against her skin. She took a deep breath, processing the implications of what had just transpired. Her cover was blown. Al-Farouk was hunting her, using Sullivan's dojo as a hunting ground. And Sullivan himself was hiding something beyond his fabricated military record. That could have gone better, Harrison observed dryly. Actually, it went exactly as it needed to, Morgan replied. We confirmed Al-Farouk is here, using the alias Al-Jabri. We know he's been asking about female instructors, and we saw Sullivan's reaction. Defensive, Foster noted. More than the situation warranted. Exactly, Morgan agreed. He's hiding something beyond his stolen valor. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. The question is what? And is he knowingly helping Al-Farouk? Or is he an unwitting pawn? Either way, he's compromised, Morgan said, and dangerous. Foster looked between them. So what's the plan? Morgan turned to him. There is no we in this, Foster. You need to walk away. This isn't your fight. Foster's expression hardened. You saved my life and the lives of my men in Kunar. I owe you a debt. Besides, I've fought Al-Qaeda before. If one of their operators is on American soil, I want in. Harrison studied him appraisingly. Your service record is impressive, Master Sergeant Foster. Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star with Valor. You're not just any soldier. No, sir, Foster agreed. I'm not. Morgan shook her head. This isn't a military operation. There's no chain of command, no backup, no extraction plan. Sounds like every operation that actually matters, Foster replied with a grim smile. Morgan looked to Harrison, who shrugged slightly. We could use the help, he admitted, especially from someone who knows Sullivan's operation from the inside. Morgan sighed. Fine, but you follow my lead. No heroics, no lone wolf bullshit. Yes, ma'am, Foster said, his tone serious despite the slight smile on his lips. Morgan turned to Harrison. We need a secure location to plan our next move. Harrison nodded. I have a safe house 15 minutes from here. We can... He was interrupted by the chime of Morgan's phone. She pulled it out, frowning at the screen. Security alert at my apartment, she said. Motion sensors triggered on the fire escape. Harrison's expression tightened. Could be Al-Farouk. Or it could be a coincidence, Morgan said, though she didn't believe it. Either way, I need to check it out. Not alone, Harrison insisted. Morgan was already moving toward her car. I don't need backup to clear my own apartment. Morgan, Harrison's voice carried a warning. If it is Al-Farouk, he's not just any operative. He was trained by Russian Spetsnaz before joining Al-Qaeda. He's credited with over 30 confirmed kills of coalition forces. Morgan paused, looking back at him. I know exactly what he is. I've faced him before. And he nearly killed you, Harrison reminded her. Morgan's hand unconsciously moved to her side, where the scar from Al-Farouk's bullet remained. Nearly isn't the same as did. Foster stepped forward. I'm going with you. Not negotiable. Morgan assessed him quickly. Despite being in his mid-40s, Foster maintained the physical condition of a much younger man. His eyes carried the alert awareness of a veteran operator. He'd be an asset, not a liability. Fine, she conceded, but we do this my way. Understood, Foster agreed. Harrison watched them with concern. I'll mobilize a tactical team. They can be on standby within 30 minutes. Morgan shook her head. No, if it is Al-Farouk, a tactical team will just drive him underground. We need to confirm it's him first. Harrison didn't look happy, but he nodded. Check in every 15 minutes. If I don't hear from you, I'm sending in the cavalry. Fair enough, Morgan agreed. Let's go. As they headed for Morgan's car, Foster glanced at her. So, Ghost Protocol, huh? Sounds like a movie title. Despite the tension, Morgan felt the ghost of a smile touch her lips. Believe me, the reality was far less glamorous than any movie. I don't know about that, Foster replied. 87 confirmed kills puts you in pretty rarefied air. Morgan's expression sobered. Those weren't achievements, Foster. They were necessities. Every one of them represents a failure of diplomacy, intelligence, or prevention. Foster studied her with new respect. You know, for a legendary ghost assassin, you've got a surprisingly philosophical outlook. I've had a lot of time to think, Morgan replied as they reached her car. Alone in the mountains, waiting for a target, sometimes for days. You either develop a philosophy or you lose your mind. As they drove toward her apartment, Morgan's mind raced through tactical scenarios. If Al-Farouk had found her home, He'd already prepared the battlefield. He would have escape routes planned, possibly traps set. He was a meticulous operator, patient and thorough. But then, so was she. And unlike their last encounter, this time she knew he was coming. Morgan's apartment building was quiet when they arrived. No police cars, no curious neighbors, nothing to indicate anything was amiss. She parked 2 blocks away, standard protocol for approaching a potentially compromised location. "Stay behind me," she instructed Foster as they approached on foot. "Watch the roof lines and windows. Al-Farouk is a trained sniper." Foster nodded, falling into the smooth, efficient movement patterns of an experienced operator. They advanced using parked cars and street fixtures as cover, minimizing their exposure. "Third floor, corner unit," Morgan said quietly as they reached the building. "Fire escape on the south side." "Where your alarm was triggered," Foster noted. Morgan nodded. "There's a loose board on the 7th step. Pressure sensitive. Anyone using the fire escape trips it." "Clever," Foster acknowledged. They entered through the main door, Morgan using her key rather than buzzing in. The lobby was empty. Morgan led them to the stairwell rather than the elevator, drawing her pistol, the Colt 1911, from her bedside case as they began to ascend. "You carry that around?" Foster whispered, nodding at the weapon. "Never leave home without it," Morgan replied. They moved silently up the stairs, Morgan taking point. At the 3rd-floor landing, she paused, listening intently. The hallway beyond the door was quiet. "My unit is the last one on the right," she whispered. "Stay here until I clear it." Foster frowned. "That's not the plan." "It is now," Morgan insisted. "You don't know the layout. You'd be a liability inside." Before he could argue further, Morgan eased open the stairwell door and slipped into the hallway. She moved with the preternatural silence that had earned her the call sign Ghost during her operational days. Each step precisely placed, her weight distributed to avoid creaking floorboards. The hallway was empty, lit by soft, recessed lighting. Morgan advanced slowly, checking corners and potential hiding spots. As she neared her apartment, she noted the door was intact. No signs of forced entry. That meant nothing. Al-Farouk wouldn't kick in a door if he could pick a lock. She reached her door and pressed her ear against it. Silence within. Morgan inserted her key silently, turned it with practiced care, then pushed the door open in one fluid motion, her pistol leading the way. The apartment was dark except for the ambient city light filtering through the blinds. Morgan entered in a combat crouch, sweeping her weapon in a practiced arc that covered the most likely threat locations first. Living room clear, kitchen clear. She moved toward the bedroom, every sense heightened. The bedroom door was ajar, just as she'd left it. Morgan approached cautiously, using the wall as cover. With a controlled movement, she pushed the door fully open and entered in a tactical stance. The bedroom was empty. The window leading to the fire escape was closed and locked from the inside. Morgan frowned. Her security system had definitely been triggered, but there was no sign of intrusion. She completed her sweep of the apartment, checking closets, the bathroom, even under the bed. Nothing. No intruder. No signs of entry. Returning to the living room, she signaled Foster to enter. He slipped in quietly, closing the door behind him. "Clear?" he asked. Morgan nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Too clear. The alarm was definitely triggered, but there's no sign of entry." Foster moved to the window overlooking the fire escape. "Could it have been an animal? Cat, maybe?" "Pressure plate requires at least 70 pounds to trigger," Morgan replied. "Not a cat." She holstered her pistol and moved to a small panel hidden behind a framed photo. Entering a code, she accessed the security system's memory. "Motion detected at 1942, she read. "That's right after we left Sullivan's dojo." "Coincidence?" Foster suggested. Morgan gave him a look that answered the question. "Right," Foster acknowledged. "No such thing." Morgan continued checking the system. No other alerts, just the one on the fire escape. "So someone tested your security but didn't attempt entry," Foster reasoned. "Reconnaissance." "Exactly," Morgan agreed. "Al-Farouk is methodical. He wouldn't rush in without knowing the layout, the security measures." "Which means he'll be back," Foster concluded. Morgan nodded grimly. "With a plan." She moved through the apartment again, this time looking more carefully at her possessions. Something felt off, but she couldn't immediately identify what. Foster watched her. "What are you looking for?" "Not sure," Morgan admitted. "Just something's not right." She stopped at her bookshelf, studying it intently. After a moment, she reached for her dog-eared copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. She opened it, flipping through the pages. "What is it?" Foster asked. Morgan held up the book. "This was on my bedside table this morning. Now it's on the shelf." "You're sure?" "I don't misplace things," Morgan said flatly. "Especially not this book. I read from it every morning." She examined the book more carefully, then noticed something tucked between pages. A small photograph. She extracted it carefully. It showed a desert landscape, rocky and barren. In the foreground lay a body, face down in the dust. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but Morgan recognized the location immediately. "Blackwater," she whispered. Foster moved closer. "What is it?" Morgan handed him the photo. "Operation Blackwater, my last mission, Northern Syria, 2022. Foster studied the image. "The body?" "To Robert Atkinson," Morgan said, her voice tight. "American surgeon working with Doctors Without Borders. Kidnapped by Al-Farouk's cell. I was sent to extract him." "Did you?" Morgan's expression darkened. "I eliminated 8 hostiles. But I was too late for Atkinson. Al-Farouk executed him moments before I reached the compound." She took the photo back, turning it over. On the reverse was written a single line in Arabic script. Morgan's jaw tightened as she read it. "What does it say?" Foster asked. "The ghost failed once. She will fail again." Morgan translated. "It's signed Omar." Foster's expression hardened. "So he was here, in your apartment." Morgan nodded, already moving toward her closet. "And he wants me to know it." She opened the closet door and pushed aside clothing, revealing a hidden panel in the back wall. Entering another code, she opened it to reveal a small arsenal. 2 additional handguns, a compact submachine gun, spare magazines, and various tactical equipment. "Planning for war?" Foster asked dryly. "Always," Morgan replied, selecting additional magazines for her 1911 and a small, concealable backup pistol. "Old habits." She closed the panel and turned to Foster. "We need to go. This location is compromised." Foster nodded in agreement. "Where to?" "Harrison's safe house," Morgan said, already packing essentials into a small go-bag. "We need to regroup, figure out Al-Farouk's next move." "And Sullivan's role in all this," Foster added. Morgan paused in her packing. "You think Sullivan is actively involved?" Foster shrugged. His reaction was off. Beyond just being exposed as a fraud, he was scared, but not just of embarrassment. "I noticed that too," Morgan agreed. "The question is, what's he hiding? And is he working with Al-Farouk knowingly, or is he being used?" Harrison's safe house was a modest ranch-style home in a quiet subdivision outside Fort Bragg. To casual observers, it was just another family residence. To trained eyes, the security features were evident. Reinforced doors, impact-resistant windows, carefully positioned external lighting that eliminated blind spots. Morgan and Foster approached cautiously, using the standard counter-surveillance route Harrison had established. The colonel met them at the door, ushering them inside quickly. "Perimeter is secure," he informed them. "Surveillance system is active. If anyone approaches within 100 yards, we'll know." The interior had been converted into an operations center, with multiple monitors displaying security camera feeds, maps, and data streams. Morgan handed Harrison the photograph Al-Farouk had left in her apartment. "He wanted me to find this. It's a message." Harrison examined the photo grimly. "Blackwater. He's taunting you." "It wasn't perceived failure," Morgan said flatly. "It was real. Dr. Atkinson died because I wasn't fast enough." "You eliminated 8 hostiles in under 40 seconds, Harrison reminded her. "You did everything humanly possible." "It wasn't enough," Morgan replied. Harrison moved to one of the computer monitors. "We've accessed security camera footage from around Sullivan's dojo. We have several images of a man matching Al-Farouk's description." He pulled up photos showing a Middle Eastern man in his late 40s with a distinctive scar running from his left eye down to his jaw. "That's him," Morgan confirmed. "The scar is from Blackwater. My bullet grazed him during the extraction attempt." "He's been staying at a motel on the outskirts of town," Harrison continued. "Paid cash, keeps to himself. Housekeeping reports he refuses service. maintains his own room. Operational security, Morgan noted. He doesn't want anyone touching his things. Sullivan made 3 calls after you left the dojo, Harrison added, moving to another monitor. First to his assistant instructor to cancel tomorrow's classes. Second to a burner phone, number untraceable. Third to a storage facility on the edge of town. Storage facility? Morgan frowned. Sullivan has maintained a climate-controlled unit there for the past 5 years. Pays annually, cash. Morgan's expression hardened with resolve. That's our next target. We needed to see what Sullivan's hiding in that storage unit. After planning the operation, Morgan and Foster left for the storage facility. They infiltrated easily, locating Sullivan's unit, 217, and bypassing the key padlock with a JSOC universal bypass device. What they found inside shocked them both. A fully operational command center, computer equipment, maps and photographs, military-grade weapons. One section of the wall was dedicated entirely to information about Morgan and the other Ghost Protocol operatives. He's been planning this for years, Morgan realized. Sullivan hasn't just been helping Al-Farouk recently. He's been collecting intelligence on me since I left the program. On a laptop, they discovered operational plans targeting all 5 Ghost Protocol women. Before they could investigate further, Harrison warned them through their comms that Sullivan was entering the facility. As they attempted to escape through a service door, Al-Farouk's voice called out in Arabic, then English. "I know you're here, Ghost." Trapped, Morgan created a diversion while Foster positioned himself outside. When Al-Farouk raised his weapon, ready to fire, Foster burst through the door as Morgan dropped to one knee, drawing her 1911. In the ensuing firefight, Morgan wounded Al-Farouk while Foster shot Sullivan in the leg. They secured both men and called Harrison for extraction. "You think this ends here?" Al-Farouk asked as they led him away. "My men are already moving on your sisters. Amsterdam, Cape Town, Tokyo. Even now they're closing in." Morgan met his gaze in the rearview mirror, her expression hardening with resolve. "Watch me." Dawn broke over Fort Bragg as Morgan stood at the window of Harrison's safe house. Al-Farouk's words echoed in her mind. "My men are already moving on your sisters." Harrison worked the secure communications system while Foster cleaned his weapon. In the basement, Sullivan and Al-Farouk remained securely restrained. "Amsterdam is secure," Harrison reported. "Lisa Reeves has been contacted and is moving to a safe location. Tokyo as well. Michelle Park is already in protective custody." "And the others?" "Still trying to reach Johannesburg and Sydney. No confirmation yet." Morgan turned from the window. "I need to talk to him." In the basement holding area, Sullivan sat with his wounded leg bandaged, his hands secured to a metal chair. He looked up as Morgan entered. "Come to gloat?" he asked. "I want to understand how a former Navy serviceman ended up working with a known terrorist." Sullivan looked away. "Do you have any idea what it's like, coming back to civilian life with nothing? No recognition, no respect. So you created a new identity, SEAL Team 6 operator, war hero." "It started small," Sullivan admitted, "just embellishing a bit to get the dojo started. Then it grew. People respected me. For the first time in my life, I mattered." "And when Al-Farouk approached you?" "He offered money, a lot of money, said he just needed information, that no one would get hurt." Morgan left Sullivan with his regrets and moved to Al-Farouk's room. The terrorist sat calmly in his restraints, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Your operation is compromised," Morgan stated flatly. "Your men in Amsterdam and Tokyo have been intercepted." "Impressive," Al-Farouk acknowledged, "but there are more men, more cells. You can't protect everyone forever." "We don't need forever," Morgan replied. "Just long enough to find and eliminate every member of your network." Through careful interrogation, Morgan got Al-Farouk to reveal that Deputy Director Wilson, one of the architects of Ghost Protocol, had sold them out for $5 million. He confirmed operations against the remaining Ghost Protocol operatives in Johannesburg and Sydney were already underway. "Is that what this is about?" Morgan asked. "Revenge for Blackwater?" Al-Farouk's hand moved toward his scarred face. "You marked me, took my honor. In my culture, such a debt can only be repaid in blood." "You killed an innocent doctor," Morgan reminded him. "Collateral damage," Al-Farouk dismissed. "In war, innocents die." Morgan's expression hardened. "That's the difference between us. To you, Dr. Atkinson was collateral damage. To me, he was the mission. Every innocent life matters. Harrison coordinated with contacts across the globe to extract the remaining Ghost Protocol operatives. Morgan and Foster combed through the files on Al-Farouk's laptop, mapping his network. Wilson gave him everything, Morgan observed grimly. Personnel files, operational records, cover identities, the whole program. For a retirement fund, Foster said in disgust. How does someone fall that far? Their most urgent concern was Rebecca Chen in Sydney. After losing contact with her security detail, Morgan established direct communication through the Ghost-to-Ghost protocol. You're in immediate danger, Morgan warned her. Wilson sold us out. We've contained Al-Farouk, but his network is still active. Wilson? The shock in Rebecca's voice was evident. Our Wilson? $5 million, Morgan confirmed grimly. Complete compromise. Before they could formulate a plan to dismantle Al-Farouk's entire network, the safe house's security system sounded an alarm. Perimeter breach, Foster announced. Southeast corner. Multiple armed individuals approaching, Harrison confirmed, checking the surveillance feeds. At least 6, possibly more. Al-Farouk's backup team, Morgan concluded. They're here for him. As they prepared to defend the safe house, the first explosion rocked the building. Foster engaged the intruders while Morgan went to secure the prisoners. She found Sullivan's restraints discarded, his room empty. Al-Farouk smiled as she entered his room. My people have come for me, as I knew they would. The building shook with another explosion. Morgan barricaded the door, but knew the position was indefensible. When Foster arrived, they decided to move Al-Farouk to the panic room. As they reached the staircase, Sullivan appeared at the top, a pistol in his hand. Making it right, he said, then fired. Not at Morgan or Foster, but at Al-Farouk. The bullet struck the terrorist in the chest. As Morgan tried to keep Al-Farouk alive, Sullivan reached into his pocket and withdrew a USB drive. Before I escaped, I downloaded everything from his laptop, names, locations, contacts, everything you need to dismantle his organization. The ceiling above Sullivan began to collapse. In his final act, he tossed the USB drive to Morgan before being buried under tons of concrete. Morgan and Foster escaped through a storm drain as the safe house continued to collapse. From safety, they watched the destruction, the USB drive, Sullivan's redemption, clutched firmly in Morgan's hand. Was it worth it? Foster asked quietly. Ask me when it's over, Morgan replied. When the network is dismantled. When my sisters are safe. 1 month later, the cafe overlooking Sydney Harbor buzzed with morning activity. Rebecca Chen sat at a corner table, her back to the wall. When Morgan slipped into the chair across from her, Rebecca simply smiled. You're late, she observed. Traffic, Morgan replied with the ghost of a smile. The others? Rebecca asked. Secure, Morgan confirmed. Lisa in Amsterdam, Michelle in Tokyo, Samantha in Cape Town. All safe. And the network? Dismantled. 17 operational cells across 12 countries. All gone. And Wilson? In custody, facing charges of treason, espionage, conspiracy to commit murder of federal agents. Rebecca sipped her coffee. What was Al-Farouk's endgame? This went beyond revenge. Ghost Protocol was just the beginning, Morgan explained. He was using Wilson to access information on every covert American operation in the Middle East. The plan was to systematically expose and eliminate our intelligence assets across the region. Creating a blind spot, Rebecca concluded. Exactly. And into that blind spot would step a new terrorist network, more sophisticated, more deadly than anything we faced before. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca placed a hand on Morgan's arm. For what it's worth, what you did, saving us, stopping Al-Farouk, it matters. You matter. Morgan felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Later, as Morgan walked along the harbor, her phone vibrated with a message from Harrison. Decision? She looked out at the ocean, thinking about choices and consequences, about ghosts and legacies. Then she typed her reply. I'm in. Some ghosts were meant to remain in the shadows. Others had a different purpose. Morgan Hayes had spent her career as the former. Now it was time to become the latter. 6 months later, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The quiet professionals training center stood in stark contrast to Sullivan's flashy dojo. Inside, the training floor was functional, practical, designed for effectiveness rather than show. Morgan moved among her students, veterans transitioning to civilian life, offering corrections and encouragement. This was her new mission, sharing her skills, helping others find purpose after service. Mike Foster entered from the office. Special visitor, Harrison's office. After class, Morgan found Harrison waiting for her. The center looks good? Students progressing well? Very, she confirmed. Harrison handed her a folder. The Ghost Protocol is being officially acknowledged, not publicly, but within the highest levels of military and intelligence communities. Morgan felt a tightness in her throat. For years, she and her sisters had operated knowing their sacrifices would never be recognized. Now that was changing. Why now, she asked. The security breach showed us the dangers of excessive secrecy, Harrison explained. And because it's right, what you and the others did deserves recognition, even if it's limited to those with the highest clearances. Before leaving, Harrison added, Dr. Atkinson's name has been added to the memorial as a civilian operator who gave his life in service to his country. Morgan felt a weight she had carried for years finally lift. That evening, as she locked up the center, a CIA deputy director approached her. We have a situation developing in Eastern Europe. A former Ghost Protocol target has resurfaced. We need your expertise. Later, Morgan's phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Chen. You got one too? Morgan asked. Just landed at Dulles, Rebecca confirmed. Lisa and Michelle are already at Langley. Samantha arrives tomorrow. Morgan smiled. The band's getting back together. You in? Morgan looked around at the life she'd begun to build, then thought of the network of quiet professionals she and her sisters were creating across the globe. I'm in, she said, but on our terms this time. Morgan Hayes, Ghost Protocol operative, would never be known to the world. Her 87 confirmed eliminations would never be celebrated. The lives she had saved would never know her name. But in the quiet corners of the intelligence community, the legend of the Ghost would endure. And in training centers around the world, her legacy would live on in the skills she passed to a new generation. The Ghost had become a guardian. And in that transformation, Morgan Hayes had finally found her way home. 1 month after the meeting at Langley, 5 women sat around a circular table in a special room, a room that existed on no official CIA floor plan. On the table lay a folder marked Phoenix Protocol, the new name for the program replacing Ghost Protocol. The terms have been approved by the director, Harrison said, his eyes moving from one woman to the next. For the first time in U.S. intelligence history, a special operations unit will have veto authority over missions they deem excessively risky to civilians or operatives. Morgan glanced at her sisters in arms. Rebecca Chen, the tactical specialist from Sydney. Lisa Reeves, the infiltration expert from Amsterdam. Michelle Park, the technology specialist from Tokyo. Samantha Wells, the psychological operations expert from Johannesburg. Together, they represented the most elite female special operations unit ever assembled. We also maintain our independence, Morgan stated, not asking but confirming. Harrison nodded. Phoenix Protocol operates outside the traditional chain of command. You report directly to a civilian oversight committee with representatives from state, defense, and intelligence. No single agency can issue orders without unanimous approval. And our identities? Lisa asked. Your official covers remain intact, Harrison confirmed. But your operational records have been sealed at the highest classification level. Your contributions, all 87 of your confirmed eliminations, Morgan, are now documented in the agency's secure archives. Future generations of intelligence officers will study your tactics, even if they never know your names. And the training centers? Michelle inquired. Fully funded through a classified black budget, Harrison replied. Each of you can establish regional training facilities like Morgan's, passing on your expertise to vetted operators. The next generation won't have to operate in complete darkness as you did. Samantha leaned forward. What about our right to refuse missions that conflict with our ethical boundaries? That's the most significant change, Harrison acknowledged. The Phoenix Protocol explicitly recognizes your authority to decline operations you deem morally compromised. No other unit in U.S. history has been granted such autonomy. Because they know we've earned it, Rebecca said quietly. Precisely, Harrison agreed. After what happened with Wilson and Al-Farouk, There's recognition at the highest levels that the old system failed you. This new approach isn't just about operational effectiveness. It's about recognizing that the best operators need both autonomy and moral clarity. Morgan opened the folder, reviewing the terms of their new existence. 5 copies of new credentials lay inside, official acknowledgement of their status as elite operators serving their country. One last thing, Harrison added. The memorial wall at Langley has been updated. Dr. Atkinson's star has been added, along with 5 anonymous stars representing the missions where Ghost Protocol operatives saved American lives at great personal risk. Morgan felt something shift inside her, a weight lifting, a wound beginning to heal. 3 days later, Morgan stood before her class at the Quiet Professionals Training Center. 20 veterans watched her intently as she demonstrated a complex tactical maneuver. Combat isn't about strength, she told them. It's about leverage, timing, and purpose. Knowing why you fight is as important as knowing how. Later that evening, Morgan's secure phone vibrated with a message. Berlin, hostage situation. Diplomatic personnel, 72-hour window. Below it, 4 response indicators showed green lights. Rebecca, Lisa, Michelle, and Samantha were all in. Morgan pressed her own indicator, turning it green. This time they weren't ghosts serving in silence. They were professionals operating on their own terms, with full agency over their missions and methods. Their contributions would still remain largely unknown to the public, but within the shadowed halls of power, the Phoenix Protocol would become legendary, not just for their lethality, but for their unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. As Morgan packed her go-bag, she placed her dog-eared copy of The Art of War on top. Sun Tzu had written, "The greatest victory is that which requires no battle." For the first time in her career, Morgan felt she was fighting not just to eliminate threats, but to reshape how America conducted its shadow wars. The ghost had indeed become a guardian. And in that transformation, Morgan Hayes had not only found her way home, she had created a new path for others to follow.